everybody. Does anybody need another mic? Okay. So in the interest of time, we'll get started. As Drew said, this is the one and only panel of today, so we'll make it a good one. I'm Michael. I'm a researcher and an amateur block builder these days, working with some teams on improving the transaction journey, such as Gattaca. And we have just about the 3 largest block builders currently live here on stage, and including 2 new block builders who are introducing innovations of their own, one of which is joining us last minute. Thanks. So that is latency optimization and queuing in action. I think we can kick it off with a quick round of intros. So if we go from left to right here, Kubi, maybe you want to take it away?
Yeah. So I'm Kubi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Gattaca, most well known for block builder Titan.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Lepso, founder of ETHGas. We do Blockspace futures, and we work with a variety of builders.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew, aka Xerox Princess on Twitter, one of the co-founders of New Construct. The company is developing a protocol called Tool.
Hi, I'm Michael Bula, a co-founder of Quasar Builder. Recently started about a year, and now we're about 15% of the block.
Hi, I'm Quintus. I'm a researcher at Flashbots, and BuilderNet is the most well-known thing we work on, I guess, in this context. But we also have, infrastructure running on L2s and some like order flow auction systems as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for the intros, everybody. So one of the core themes of this panel is to understand better what it is that builders actually compete on. Okay. And there's an elephant in the room here, which is exclusive flow. It's been written about a lot. There's plenty of papers. We will return to this later. But I think we can take it one step back and look at it from an even more basic level. And look at what builders offer to originators. Maybe one good way of putting formulating the question is, why would an originator send flow to your specific builder? What are some of the services you offer? What are some of the guarantees you can give? How do you compete for flow in the first place? Maybe we'll do the round again.
Okay. So I think the prerequisite for getting transactions in general is trust. So given that you have the capability to potentially front-run reorder in adversarial ways, there's just this necessity to have some sort of trust. Then I think if you can move past that, the mental model we like to apply is generally just best execution overall. And then you have different categories of block space consumers, so flow providers. And given that a specific vertical, they might have specific requirements. So I'll make an example. For example, if you work with low latency traders like SexDex guys, their incentive is to get the absolute last microsecond to send you a transaction before the auction closes. So from that perspective, what is the end-to-end latency of ingesting a transaction at some point of your network that's be flowing through your system, constructing an entire block, submitting that block to relay where the auction happens. So that, for example, is one way of giving them best execution guarantee, coupled with cancellations as well. So how quickly can you replace or cancel transactions, remove them from a block, especially if they actually reduce the block value. Then you have other consumers like, let's say, some retail aggregators, such as a wallet. There it might be how much can you optimize the costs of executing a transaction within a block without it sliding to the next block, but then maximize or minimize how much of the priority fee that they're willing to pay for inclusion is being used for inclusion. That could be a different category. So I think you can just walk across all the different types of consumers of block space and then really zero in on what is it they specifically want, and then you optimize.
Sequentially, I guess. We're not a block builder primarily. We kind of tinker in that space. But I'm interested to hear what you would say because you build blocks a little bit differently. So I will defer to you on this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you. I think there are basically three vectors that are important, three factors. First is the execution guarantees, second is privacy, and third is latency. And I think all of the features that block builders and any kind of intermediary in the space can provide basically comes down to like these three factors, right? And yeah, so I think block builders are, and I think the lines are like kind of washing out right now, right, in the space because everyone's trying to tap into everything. Like there's OFAs like MV blocker. They're very, very strict about how their order flow is being executed. They're looking at whether they're being sandwiched, etc. Right? They may merge some of the order flow as well. Then there's builders. They have the actual execution environment at which like transactions are being executed. So as Kubi said, the transaction order is what they're primarily looking to like optimize. And then there's like relays that in PBS, right? They're optimizing latency. Specifically to deliver these bids from block builders to the end validators. So they can commit to the block. And what we are working on, this is called Tool, which translates to Trustless Order Flow Operations Layer. It is a peer-to-peer network that aims to connect all of these participants on the same common ground so they can like do all of these things in the trade-offs that they would like to see for themselves, right? So the transaction merging, searching, like the commitment delivery. So the commitments is like what order flow is being packed into, right? And so this is how they can collaborate and create the block together. So there is no like information asymmetry, and the block is being created and delivered in the best way possible, considering all of these three factors I mentioned previously. So this is what we're working on, and yeah, I'll probably might dig deeper into that, like answering other questions, but yeah, I'll pass the torch.
Thank you guys for going first and explaining most of it. And just to add a little bit, I think that Kubi started with trust, and I do think that that is one of the most important parts of the process in the block building space at the moment. And I think it's a little bit of a mind change from a lot of stuff that happens in the consensus layer, execution layer, a lot of less trust required. And so block building is where the trust seems to have kind of gone. And so that can be a bit of a hurdle for keeping the builder space decentralized because, once a couple of builders build up a lot of trust, it's more and more easy to trust them. And so when new builders start, right, they've got to build up that level of trust to whether even it's an exclusive flow or non-exclusive flow, hey, you guys are trying to do what's in our best interest. And so our background was that we were, very long Ethereum, my founder and I, and we're looking at the builder space as a linchpin, as a part of the whole Ethereum ecosystem that, could suffer first from potential censorship issues if, everything goes into a single builder. So we're kind of here to bring more of that decentralization to the mix, to be part of the talks and work with all the other builders and how we address those issues and keep the space moving in a direction that trust can be a little bit more spread out and a little easier for the order flow providers to decentralize their flow.
Yeah, I think some of what I'll say will be quite similar to everyone else. I think maybe one important difference in how Flashbots views things is that we've always wanted to be like the game designer as opposed to like a player in the game. And obviously this can like recurse up and up and up. But I think we run the block builder or the like building it now, because that's the point from which we would like to do this like market structuring. So I think last year we didn't do as good of a job as we wanted, but our idea is to one, be neutral and verifiably neutral in the block building space. That's why we use TEEs. That's why we have like programmatic auction rules, like whereas I guess the other way in which block builders work is they'll have some sort of like ad hoc auction where it's like per a user type, there'll be an agreement, say you pay this much, and we'll like calculate how much we should pay you back, and it'll be sort of a more of like traditional business. Whereas we're trying to make this like programmatic and verifiable to like really emphasize the neutrality. And as part of that, we would like to like move towards modularization, like involving more people in the process. So we talk about block building as this like monolithic thing, but really it's a process that starts like from the user signing a transaction. All these order flow auctions were originally designed to incorporate more actors, where like more actors can back run these transactions. Effectively like already partially building the block. So the block builder receives these like partial blocks and combines them together. And that's a trend we'd like to continue doing as different applications and different use cases, even from the compliance side we just heard about, have different needs for different kinds of execution. We want to enable people to innovate on that without us being the bottleneck. And so as Princess can say, like how I think how you were introduced to TEEs and how these different kinds of things that we're working with Princess, who was a searcher, on modularizing the process and taking this like concentrated information that the builder has access to and making it accessible to other parties without introducing additional trust bottlenecks, so that more people can participate in this building process. And we want to continue doing this.
Fantastic. Thanks everybody for the comprehensive answers. So I will attempt a summary. Originators want to get into blocks cheaply, predictably, and in a timely fashion. And for those in the room that are unaware, this is actually the second edition of the Blockspace Forum. And one takeaway we had from the first Blockspace Forum is that there are certain structural features which limit this type of guarantee, right? Builders bring different things to the table, and originators may express a preference for a certain builder, right? And the way this type of pattern is commonly called is exclusive flow. Exclusive flow then has a couple of second-order effects. For example, it becomes harder to price block space, right? There's more volatility, and the fundamental reason behind it is just because blocks are being built from a subset of transactions, okay? So I'm curious to the group. Exclusive flow is a very fundamental pattern, but do you think it is something that even has to be offset? Does that have to be addressed in some way? I know that there have been certain approaches like BuilderNet and really block merging. So I'm curious to get your general take on exclusive flow, if you feel that is a dynamic that's going to persist in the long term, and how you think that can be best offset. And maybe whoever wants, Michael, I see you there. Maybe you want to kick it off.
So exclusive flow is something I think that isn't talked about enough or even understood enough. And so even sometimes talking to like core devs, they kind of sometimes look at block building as this more flat, like everybody competing equally. But really, when you have exclusive flow, if you've got even a small percentage relative to even like 100 other builders, you can, by definition, build 90% of the blocks, right? Even if you've only got a little bit of extra flow, right? Because you're going to be able to outcompete on most blocks for most of the situations. So, it's definitely something that needs to be talked about and worked through and figured out how to address, because it's just a market force that will drive centralization, whether or not even all of us want it to or not, right? It's just how the market will tend if we're not aware and thinking about it as a problem.
Okay, I think the private order flow is mostly the result of the information asymmetry and the snowball effect that happens after that, like that basically makes the builders that have most of the private order flow lend more blocks, and by that attracting more private order flow, right? So, and that's kind of creates like winner takes all situation, where like the more you get, the more you get. And this is, I think, very bad sort of influence to the overall market structure. And this is something that we try to solve as well as part of our protocol. So the basically the order flow is shared as much as possible, and the barrier of entry is being lowered, and there's no this kind of flywheel effect of this like reinforcement, because everyone can leverage the same set of transactions or like atomic bundles to create the final block. And because I think the order flow will concentrate on some levels, and I think there is a point where it's impossible to completely eliminate, the same as like MEV at all as well, right? Because it can be like vaguely defined, and it's impossible to like eliminate 100%, right? But then there's like a question like at which levels that all concentrate and which levels we can all consider is like healthy for the market for the long term and for the competitive structure of it. And yeah, I think for what in our vision, what we are trying to achieve is the order flow being concentrated on the higher level, closer to where currently OFAs are, order flow auctions. So they can sort of provide what could be said like trust to the end users, while using all of the tech like below them, right, in the supply chain to achieve all of the like execution guarantees and latency and the privacy, right? So there is just like, we'll be closing the gap, but they wouldn't be defining factor to how transactions are landing on Ethereum as it is currently the case.
I think maybe one framing of the problem. Oh, so I agree that it's something that should be addressed. I think maybe one framing of the problem that's helpful to think through is to say like, look, there are actually many different users of Ethereum, different kind of use cases, and it is maybe it's a separate conversation. But let's say it's fine if someone sort of like is able to serve one use case well. I think this is sort of inevitable and a good aspect of competitive markets. I think what's challenging in block building is that all of these use cases get bundled together, so that dominance in one of the use cases, serving one larger set of order flow senders basically more effectively, gives control over everything, and gives influence over everything. And that isn't even something that block builders may want. Like they may not care about some subset of users, or not even be focusing on them. But because of the way blocks are structured, and because we don't have the like right interfaces, everything gets bundled together. And I think one way out of it is maybe to try unbundle these roles and allow for a bit more specialization. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on that too. I think that something that gets not talked about a lot is that there are actually many dozens of builders technically. It's not difficult to set up a builder, a piece of software that builds transactions just from the mempool, right? And part of the specialization that has happened up to this point is certain builders just build their own transactions, and they don't build a lot of mempool transactions or serve larger sets of order flow. And so that's not great for the network too, right? So when there's a bug in certain layers, even consensus layer bugs that can cause downtime, there's less builders building order flow for everybody, right? So there's kind of a conflict of interests in needing to specialize, but also serve all of Ethereum that I think is still a problem we're trying to solve too.
So my perspective is thinking about what are the incentives here, like why does exclusive order flow exist? And I think from my perspective, it comes from this fundamental tension of let's say the proposer who's selling their block space wanting to maximize like how much value they capture, and then the user is on the other side, so the consumer of block space wants to minimize, so want to pay as little as possible. And the way the market structure was designed, or the current market structure is, the price discovery kind of happens in a way where the more order flow concentrates with a single source. So the ideal outcome from a, I guess, consumer's perspective, not in terms of the properties and the guarantees that gives you, but just from an economic perspective, if all the order flow would go to one builder and there would be no competition, then basically all the priority fees could be like refunded back to the user. And I think that's at the crux of it. Then there are lots of other dynamics. So then it's like, okay, there are specific subcategories and all of these other things. But I think that's like one of the key things that has led to the clear incentive, because it's from the upstream consumer perspective. It's like, okay, well, how can I optimize this? And that is significant cost. And then I think if we sort of recognize that and then work our way backwards of how we reshuffle things, how to address that, I think it's a good way of thinking about it. And then it can be, let's share order flow with everyone, which obviously we can't, because then, you know, it's basically going to the public mempool and all the problems with that, right? And then it's, let's say, using a specific type of technology, and that works for a subset of users, right? Like whether it's TEs, for example, and it comes with its constraints, a bunch of constraints, but it's a trade-off. Then there are also users who are like, okay, I don't care about these guarantees, and so like I'm happy to work with like a specific builder, and then trust is involved again, and that's kind of what has led to the status quo. So I don't have the exact answer. My intuition is also like more what Quintus was saying, that you kind of want to have some layer that allows, or maybe that's what you're saying as well, is having partial sequences being assembled and then being finalized somewhere. And ideally, that finalization layer kind of exhibits enough guarantees for the upstream providers of order flow or sequences and whatever that looks like. And ideally, we have many of those as well. So like we don't diminish all the properties around censorship and so on, so on, failure risks. But yeah, that's how I think about it.
I was going to say, but this means you make less money, right? In the sense that, like, you know, the market structure is what it is, right? And we have like commercial entities that are trying to, you know, be as efficient as they are, and that is the incentive to make more money. And so, in the absence of EF changing the market structure, then it's basically the validators coming out and saying, well, I want to support this type of market structure, maybe broadly, and maybe that's more healthy. But anyway, I'm just thinking about, or maybe we sequence blocks differently, like with
I
1
think
second slots or something.
I think it's pricing power, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think
Like currently it just goes to
builder
whoever has that
is a
information.
middleman, right? So you're going to get squeezed on the validator side, or that was an initial status quo, and now you're getting squeezed on the consumer side.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you're getting a fee for whatever service you're providing, but yeah, I don't think it's as obvious as, okay.
Yeah. I just don't see a solution in the near term unless there's the EF changes the market structure, really, or validators say, I want to get paid less because it's better for the ecosystem, but we'll see.
Yeah, on that topic, there's a fantastic technical workshop coming up tomorrow, which I think I can recommend for a deeper discussion of this type of challenge. I will attempt a quick recap. So basically, what we want is a landscape where we have many implement specialists, right? I think specialist was one word that was mentioned, where we have many specialists that offer specific services that have their own implementations that are robust. And then another motive that I think emerged, and there can be some layer, right, potentially of reconciling that. Yeah, but this is a big group, and we don't have too much time left, unfortunately. I want to ask one question which comes at this whole thing from a slightly different angle. So if each of you imagine that you are Ethereum, right? You're the person in charge of the transaction pipeline, the agent of Ethereum, the chain. What do you think the optimal transaction pipe journey looks like for Ethereum? And what do you maximize? Do you maximize block value? Do you maximize block space utilization? Can you even define that objectively? So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Whoever wants to jump in first, feel free to go ahead.
How many hours do you have?
We have 5 minutes in total.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit abstract question, so I'll give an abstract answer. I think the philosophy that Ethereum has taken historically has been the bazaar and not the cathedral, where it's supposed to be an infinite garden. We know there's a lot of even if they seem from the outside like small changes, a lot of important nuance in how DeFi has evolved and other use cases. And I don't think we want to come up with a market structure that enshrines a very specific way of doing things and limits this innovation. But at the same time, leaving it, as Kubi was saying, completely free can lead to these sort of like races to the bottom where all the value is paid up to the validators. And our task is to, I think, balance this a need for optimizing welfare, which is good for the consumer, but also just good for the network overall, with the short-term, more parochial incentives of the individual validators that comprise the overall network. And we should do that while while actually enabling people to innovate in the system, as opposed to sort of concentrating control within a monolithic system that one of these people control. Maybe that's too abstract, but
yeah. To add on that, the complexity of building Blockspace falls on the builders, right? And when you mentioned about giving all the value to the validators, part of the problem with that is funding the businesses that are dealing with the complexity in the builder space. So we need to be able to pay for the infrastructure and the salaries to be able to build a valuable block space. And I think there's a challenge there to do it profitably in a decentralized manner as much as possible. And I like the bazaar, cathedral. I think the bazaar is our approach too. It's just, I think we need to have more of these conversations to help us all figure out how we get there and keep Ethereum healthy in the process.
I think from the high-level perspective, we can see Ethereum transaction supply chain as an attempt to connect two parties. First is the order flow providers, and second are validators. Everything in between we can treat as a basic platform business problem, right? So platform is the current type of most businesses, right? Connecting customers and connecting suppliers. And this is absolutely the same. There are suppliers who are selling blocks. These are validators, and they are buyers who are buying the block space. These are order flow providers. You have to connect these two, and then the question how does this platform looks like? How much is decentralized, etc. But I'm totally agree with Kubi that we should dig back from the incentives, right, to connect these two, and how the structure would look like. I think it should follow this incentive, because otherwise it would definitely be hacked. And we see this with L2 sequencers, for example, if we go down to how we order transactions and everything, because L2 sequencer, they say it's the best way to order transactions, and it's impossible to hack. But then we had Arbitrum facing issues with million connections, concurrent connections, and going down because of all of the searchers have tried to literally mine all of those connections to have the priority ordering. And this is happening right now, is just not as public, so not many people know about that. But these games, literally games, are happening all the time. And if we don't dig back from incentives and we try to enforce some kind of structure, we end up in a way of someone getting ahead of someone else without everyone else knowing. And this system will become increasingly more opaque over time, and this wouldn't serve any good purpose for everyone involved. Basically, this is sort of my abstract take on the abstract question. Yeah,
I'm trying to put on my Ethereum hat here, and I was thinking that and I think this is impossible, by the way, what I'm going to suggest, but it's that I think the optimal solution, at least hypothetically from their perspective, would be to do what results in the most streamlined or economically efficient like manner, or whatever has the least harm to end users. I guess there's this notion that like there's a certain level of MEV that's acceptable to some degree, but I think it would be an interesting like thought exercise to say like someone, I don't know who, right? But we reward a block builder who causes the least harm to the end user. And that would just be an interesting experiment.
So I think high level directionally agree, I think, with everyone. I don't think anyone has said anything contentious here. I would say there's conceptually the ideal outcome, which would be, let's say, because we want these type of properties for the protocol. So the easiest to do this would be, let's say, have 1,000 builders and everyone gets all the order flow and that's it. But then we also have to grapple with reality, and I guess that goes to the incentive part and understanding what are the dynamics around solving these types of problems. And so I guess, yeah, ideally maybe 1,000 builders and everyone gets all the order flow, but in reality, what does a ecosystem look like that has a stable equilibrium and an ecosystem that then maintains the core protocol properties to the degree that it doesn't diminish the overall utility of what we're trying to do here. That's sort of directionally, I think, where I would go. Yep.
Excellent. So unfortunately, we are out of time. Next time we'll schedule an hour, and tomorrow we have 8 hours. So thanks everybody for contributing. And one more question, maybe from the audience.
I mean, everything is so based on technology. So how can I make assure that everybody is going to have access to technology in the future? Because this is not so certain. I mean, right now it's available for everybody and it's affordable, but this is not going to be necessarily the case in the future.
Could you specify what you mean by technology, or do you just mean like
AI technology in general, or I mean access to systems. This is we don't pay for the moment, but in the future it's not going to be free of charge. It's going to be monopolized, probably.
right? This out there question, out there answer. I feel like the analogy with block building is that running the software, as we heard, is not that hard. Local models maybe not that hard, but what ends up being this like concentrating force is information and data, and in our case it's order flow. I think the answer remains the same, that if you want to build a market structure that doesn't concentrate power, you need to build it where many actors can efficiently cooperate together to produce something that is of equal or greater value than that what a monopolist can do.
Maybe an add-on might there be a sovereign AI agent that one day is the ultimate block builder.
We're working on it.
I guess one more from Ellie.
I was wondering exactly like what the dynamic is of exclusive order flow. So I can see two sides of it. I can see that, as let's say a wallet is a very good example, that there is some benefit I get from sending my order exclusively to one builder. Like it gives me a better execution. Naively, it seems like actually I would probably, because all of the main builders have a baseline level of trust, so they should just send it to multiple builders. Or is the dynamic that, the reason that there is exclusive order flow is just because it is payment for order flow from the builders that comes with the commitment of exclusivity. So I'm kind of wondering why it exists.
Yeah, I think like a very simple example would be, let's say current slots, there's only one transaction, right? That's paying 1 ETH. And if that one transaction gets sent to, let's say, 2 block builders, everyone has 1 ETH. Now there's a PBS auction and everyone will take that 1 ETH of firing power to bid, right? Okay, if that one transaction only went to one builder, now that builder just has to pay one way, right? Win the auction, and then that delta is what is available as a kickback, and that's the dynamic.
I would maybe counter a little bit, which is that in that simplified scenario, I think that is true. But what I try to tell the order flow providers is, you've got 12 seconds, right? And each builder is going to be building a certain percentage, right? So let's say Titan's building 50% of the blocks. That means if you're only sending to Titan, on average, you're going to have to wait 2 blocks for inclusion, right? So you have to balance as a provider what you care most about, right? And in the current structure, the gas refund cost, I think, is somewhat more minor. I think there's a little bit more importance for certain flow providers for things like really latency, handling cancellations very quickly, and then when you have real specific needs. But overall, I would say generally, I think for a lot of order flow, sending to multiple builders, if you're thinking about, am I going to save X, Y, Z, and it's like 1% of your order flow, you have to think about 10 years in the future, where do I want my business to be? And if you are part of the problem, making a centralized market structure, that's not in your best interest.
That's a fair perspective, and I agree with that. But I want to recurse back and half add on to Kubi's answer and half maybe I guess it's all adding on. So firstly, there are 2 actually sets of incentives, right? One is this direct optimization incentive where you're trying to optimize inclusion versus payment, I guess, or your execution quality. But there is also this other element that wallets and people who control order flow need a way to charge, and sometimes the structure of the system doesn't allow them to do that, and so they'd rather put a high gas fee or find some other way of then using these builder systems to then get money out of it as well, which is maybe a reasonable incentive. I mean, they need to make money as well, but that does play into it. But like we heard, gas refunds isn't that large of a component. And then now responding to Kubi, I think the analogy is really good. If one user pays 1 ETH, and then the builder can pay 1 GUI to the validator, then that value can be kicked back to the user. But then the real question is, why is the user paying 1 ETH instead of 1 GUI? And that to me is an auction design problem. And what makes the auction design really hard at the moment is that there are different auction designs at different builders. And so these systems end up competing against each other. But in some hypothetical system, really it's Kubi's idea of having one builder representing all the users and negotiating for them. But if that was one system as opposed to one builder, you could achieve, you could achieve the same thing that's happening now, but it doesn't have to be in this very concentrating fashion. Anyway, sorry, I think we're probably over. Yeah.
And one question, and only one person can answer because the next panel or fireside chat is ready. So,
yes, a very quick one. Thanks for your discussion. So we've talked about exclusive flow mainly here as a differentiator between builders and how they can achieve some sort of dominance in the market. What about the latency aspect and the infra performance? How does that sort of drive a differentiation between builders, especially because right now it seems to be interesting to submit lots of bids at a lower resolution just to get to the last millisecond, to Kubi's point? Just curious about that and how it fits into the EPBS evolution of builders' role and what validators are going to have to handle from a traffic perspective.
It's a little opaque, but from the outside, obviously. But from our perspective, latency is just not as an important an issue for us, I think, as the issues of order flow. You don't need a large amount of order flow advantage to basically win a huge number of slots, right? And regardless of how fast or slow you are, we don't know when a validator is going to ask for the block. So, it's not like one builder who's got a 5 millisecond advantage is always going to win, because even if we're 10 milliseconds slower, some validators are asking for the block a second before, and some are asking for 2 seconds later. But what really makes the difference is over that 1 second, how much value are you adding to that block, right? And so, again, like if you're like thinking of 5 milliseconds as the most important thing, really what I think you need to be looking at is inclusion time in terms of spreading that out to guarantee the best inclusion you can kind of get, unless you have some real specific needs.
All right. And sorry, not everyone else can answer, but give the panel a round of applause.